What is good, YouTube? My name is Velikan. In this video, we are taking a look at the tier 6 relics for League 6 Demonic Pacts for Oldschool Runescape, and we are going to start with the Grimoire. Upon choosing this relic, you will receive the Arcane Grimoire. The Grimoire can be used to freely swap between spellbooks. It acts as a Book of the Dead, and additionally, when you select this relic, you will unlock access to all prayers and spells, regardless of area, quest, or diary requirements. So, obviously, you will receive all spellbooks. That means Ancients without the Desert, Lunars without Fremenic, and Arceus without Zeah. It will give you all prayers. That would be Piety without Kanarin, and then Rigor and Augury without Zeah. Very cool. Grimoire is a little bit devalued if you plan to go to Zeah to begin with. So, Grimoire, if you're looking to do, for example, a Bloodfire Mage build without the Desert, because you dislike it, Grimoire is a very easy pick. Other elemental mage builds seem strong without Ancients though, so keep that in mind. That said, skipping Ancients as a mage build is something that you need to be 100% sure of. You can respec your mage build to accommodate for Ancients, but you can't reroll your tier 6 relic, right? So keep that in mind. If you don't want to go Grimoire for whatever reason, or you think you don't need Ancients, and then you don't go Desert, you are basically locking yourself out of Ancients, whereas if you had the Grimoire, you can still go into Ancients later because you can reroll, or respec rather, right? Ancients have AoE, healing, and freezes, and they may be very useful in certain areas. So be very careful or be very careful with skipping them. Then Eternal Sustenance. Food is no longer consumed when eaten. That is probably the shortest relic description that I've ever seen, and I'm all for it. However, I am not a big Eternal Sustenance fan. So let's start at the top. Eternal Sustenance doesn't save potions. That is, well, annoying. The big question is Sarah Brew a food, yes or no? If it is, then it might be a little bit more valuable, this relic is. If it isn't, it's just food. Food is plenty, but the best food in the game is potentially annoying to get, especially in large amounts. Cooked Moonlight Antelope is one of the best foods in the game. You can heal 14 HP and then 12 HP over time with it, and then Manta Rays for 22 HP, and you would need a Manta Ray source. So these two foods might be a little bit annoying to get. And then, of course, Wilderness Goers and Transmuters can get the food relatively easy. So there's that. So the big thing with Eternal Sustenance, of course, is it saves inventory spots. That might be decent, especially if you're skipping Evil Eye in tier 3. If you don't know, Evil Eye is the relic that lets you teleport to bosses. With Eternal Sustenance, you can stay there indefinitely. So that might be good. It might fit a rush strategy with Abundance and Woodsman. And then simply choose to not farm a lot of food, right? Then, the common argument is that infinite food is very noob friendly, and I disagree. I don't like that argument whatsoever. I think boss difficulty is solved by learning the mechanic, and spam eating loses DPS and it puts you at a disadvantage. It puts you on the back foot where you keep eating hits from the boss. You keep eating, you keep spam clicking your food in your inventory, you mess up the mechanics, then you get some more damage, and you get into this loop where you just get damaged and you have to spam eat. I don't like that. I think you're better off just planking a couple of times, learning the mechanics, and once you do, the entire draw from Eternal Sustenance gets worse, right? That's why I don't like the relic. If you are a noob though, and you are still afraid of learning mechanics, I suggest going a healing build like the Water Mage build. I think that will provide you with enough healing where you wouldn't need Eternal Sustenance anyway, and I think that's much better than grabbing Eternal Sustenance and then clicking or spam clicking your sharks through every encounter. Then some bosses, of course, may DPS straight through your combo eats. A shark plus a Karambram is 38 HP. That's a lot of health to heal in one tick, but at the same time, it's not like that much health, and certain bosses will DPS you like either 100 to 0, or it will do more than 40 damage in a short period of time. One counterpoint, Eternal Sustenance might be good with a Thorns build. So I don't want to get into builds too much in this video, but there is a build that lets you reflect damage. Then, of course, if you can just spam click food, you can basically keep yourself up, hopefully, and then you will reflect the boss to death. That said, I do think that the Thorns build is a little bit of a meme. I don't think it's cool to play. It might be funny the first 5 times, but then when you need to get 300 KC, it might not be that fun anymore. So be warned is all I'd say. And then the biggest historical argument for this relic is it is really good in areas like Nex, Colosseum, and Inferno. That's mostly because Inferno is a more of a marathon, so you need your supplies there. That said, I still doubt that we need it there. Reason being is I think the DPS is higher than it is in any leagues before this one. And I also think that like with the healing and whatever, we are way stronger, and not just in terms of DPS. And all in all, I am not really a fan of Eternal Sustenance. Moving on, Culling Spree. When you are assigned a Slayer task, you will be able to choose from 3 different options, and you will also be choosing how many you wish to slay, and you can pick anywhere between 5 and 200. Where possible, at least one of the choices will be a boss Slayer task. Really cool. Then, additionally, upon slaying a superior, there's a 50% chance that another will spawn. Very cool. Superior Slayer creatures will always drop 1, 2, or 3 elite clues. You will gain all the effects of a imbued Slayer helm without needing to wear one. That is really powerful. You can purchase any of the Slayer reward store perks for free, and you can also get the rune pouch, the herb sack, and the looting bag for free. Right, so the imbued Slayer helmet is 15% accuracy and damage. That's for mage and range. I think melee is 16.6%. I'm not really sure. Anyway, 50% accuracy and damage is, I think, more than a 15% DPS increase, but for the sake of this video, I'm just going to keep reiterating 15%. That's the term I'm going to use. Moving on. Control over your Slayer tasks will allow you to leverage that 15% damage, and it will allow you to do so very well. That said, you're not always on task. That was something you had in previous league. And you not being on task always means that you're still playing around with your Slayer tasks, and that might get a little annoying. So that is the one downside from Culling Spree. You can use Blood Moon armor, Void armor, or Darox with this. There may be some other armor sets as well, but that will be very strong. You will get plenty of elite clues with the superiors. The superiors will also buff Slayer experience rates, I think significantly. I think it will be quite nice. Then, I initially thought the imbued heart from additional superiors is kind of nice, but I think it's not needed. One of the first magic pacts that you will get is once you regenerate runes, your magic level is boosted by 1. And once you get your rune regeneration up, I think you can get very close to the 10 magic levels. And I think the imbued heart is either obsolete or it's a very, very minor buff because they don't stack, right? So I'm going to argue that imbued heart is not needed. So if you're thinking Culling Spree for additional superiors and then grinding out an imbued heart as a mage, think twice, is all I'll say. Then, if you aren't slaying, and for example, if you've got to do a lot of raids, then this relic is quite useless. And some areas like Fremenic and Wilderness are very Slayer monster heavy, right? So it definitely depends on your area picks. So my conclusion, I am a certified Eternal Sustenance hater. I don't like the relic whatsoever. I am not a fan of eating during combat, and I think it kind of sucks. It will not help you in a lot of places, I am pretty sure. And I think even for noobs, I don't think it's a really good relic. It might be viable with a Thorns build, but other than that, like, I'm not a fan of Eternal Sustenance whatsoever. Then for DPS, you are pitting offensive prayers versus the 50% DPS on task. I think Culling Spree, I know Culling Spree on task out DPS is Grimoire prayers, but I do believe that Grimoire is a little bit better overall because it's just easier to use. Just flick on your prayer and then you're done, right? If you are in Asgarnia and you are a ranger or a mage, you have Deadeye and Mystic Vigor, and that means the gap between Augury and Rigor is a little bit smaller, and then Culling Spree might be more interesting to you. If you are an air mage, your spells, not spells, but your spells deal 7% damage for each active prayer, and Augury is a DPS loss. That said, you do get Preserve, right? So with Preserve and without Augury, I think the max DPS for air mages is still going either Zeah or Grimoire, right? Then Rangers and mages can go Zaya plus Culling Spree for the best possible DPS, of course. And then alternatively, you can go Grimoire plus Mauritania plus Kandarin for the Imbued Slayer helmet, or Fremenic, because the Fremenic Echo helmet counts as an Imbued Slayer helmet, right? Melees, of course, don't need the Imbue variant, so they can skip Kandarin. That said, Kandarin has Piety. So if you don't go Fremenic and you go Mory plus Kandarin, you do need to equip your Slayer helmet, and that is slightly worse than going Zaya plus Culling Spree, right? Because you lose your helmet slot to the Slayer helmet. And for points, I would suggest Culling Spree only because it helps the 50 million Slayer the best. I don't know the exact difference between not having Culling Spree versus having Culling Spree in regards to your Slayer experience rates per hour, but you're not getting any experience from Grimoire unless you might be leveraging the AoE from Ancients in, let's say, the Catacombs or whatever. But other than that, I think Culling Spree is a little bit better for Slayer training. And then for points, I would suggest Culling Spree. But I don't know. It's not like the reason to pick Culling Spree, I would argue. So that's my conclusion, and see you next time. Thank you for watching, and bye-bye.